Hello, everybody. As you know, Keep Talking is about really listening, about hearing with an open mind and heart. As we wind down 2023 and we look to 2024 with hope, I thought you'd really enjoy meeting my guest today. She's someone who exudes good humor and optimism. She's a trade unionist, a human rights lawyer, a law professor. She's also one of the 16 people that included academics, social workers, activists, and journalists who were arrested and jailed in the Bhima Koregaon violence case. She received bail in December 2021, and earlier this year, in fact, just a few months ago, came out with a book based on her experience of being in jail and the observations that she had about how the prison system deals with women. So, and that book is called From Farsi Yard. Sudha, thank you very much for talking to us and making time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for listening, as you said. Yes.
How is Bombay treating you? How is Mumbai treating you? Because we know that you're not allowed to move out of Mumbai. That's one of the conditions of your bail, isn't it? For someone who's not lived in the city, how are you doing?
Well, I had lived a very long time ago, for about a year when I was in class 11, and I had come. I used to study in the central school, and I had come to live with my uncle while my mother was abroad for a year. So I actually, so that time I was studying in the central school at Kolaba, and I used to go up and down from Prabhadevi to Kolaba. So a little bit of familiarity is there, though not much. But I must say two things. One is that a lot. I mean, the civil society here in Mumbai has been very warm, very very welcoming, very helpful. The lawyers, the social activists, my friends. So whether it was in the matter of getting sureties or getting a place to stay or getting back in touch with trade union friends, or whether it was beginning to, restarting work as a lawyer. So I've been able to do all of that. I manage. The second thing about Mumbai is, even though the mills are gone, it is still very much a working class city. So people are, so now that I've got used to the commute of, sort of Borivali to Churchgate, and you begin to see, how this city just works so, efficiently, like clockwork. And I mean, lakhs and lakhs of people have just got their life is just moving. So I've got, of course, I very much miss Chhattisgarh. That is the area of my work. That is the place of my work. And I can only now, maybe make phone calls to inquire about my lawyer colleagues or my union colleagues there. Fortunately, due to video conferencing, I'm also appearing in the Chhattisgarh High Court. So a little bit of resumption of work has happened, yes.
Before I get into some of the stuff that came out in the book, there's another thing that I want to get to. When I introduced you, I described the good humor that you exude. It's there even in the book, the tonal quality of the book. It's written in a very informal way, even when you're talking about complex structures that make and stories that are actually quite heartbreaking, and yet your tonal quality is very light. It's fun, and you can see the funny side also. How do you exude such good humor? What is the secret of this optimism? Because I think there are so many people who get disappointed so easily. And here you are, having done the work you have in Chhattisgarh, where you have fought many rights battles, and then personally your own experience in the past few years. What is the secret of your optimism and good cheer?
Well, two things. One thing is that, as I said, I mean, I mean, though of course the initial experience of going to jail is very shocking. It for some time it's like uh, yeah, it's a great indignity, and it's but as the time passed, I mean, it was so clear to me that I was still someone who was still so very privileged,
Mm.
as compared to the women prisoners around me. I mean, whether it was in terms of having people come and meet me, whether it was in terms of having good lawyers, whether it was in terms of knowing that they that even understanding. I mean, however bizarre the case might have been, I could at least understand what was going on.
Mm.
But for these women, many of them were incarcerated because of their circumstances more than anything else. Many of them were abandoned by families. They would be dependent on legal aid, or they might not have lawyers at all. They wouldn't understand much of their case. I mean, for them, it was just one long wait. And wait for what? I mean, it was, it was a very difficult situation. And in that difficult situation, you would find them, looking after children, helping each other, trying to earn something, work very hard. Some of them, particularly the convicts, would be doing that. And yeah, so actually, I think it was just observing them that really made me admire this resilience.
Mm.
So that was one thing. And the other thing is that having always been a fighter of losing battles, I mean, there are few battles which I've won. I've fought a lot of them, but I've won very few of them. So I think that makes you understand that you're not the center of the world. It's okay. And one has to take oneself a little less seriously.
Mm.
And I think that is where the humor comes from. Because as I said, I mean, even in Baikala, when I was writing so many applications, the whole night I would be writing applications. But as I said in the book, I mean, my failure rate was spectacular. I mean, I couldn't even get one bail. So, so there's only two ways you can deal with that. I mean, one is to give up, which I can't,
Mm.
and other is to laugh through it. Yeah.
Baikala jail was the second jail that you were in. The first jail where you were taken to from Faridabad when you were brought to Pune was Yerbada jail, which is one of India's biggest jails, high security, famous for a lot of reasons. What was the first thing was solitary confinement, isn't it, Professor Sen? And you were in solitary confinement, and it was when you were in solitary confinement that your observations began of the system in which you found yourself. Would you just describe a little bit of those days for us?
Yeah. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. After the police custody part was over, during the police custody, we were kept in the lockup.
Mm.
And then after that, we were taken to Yerbada. So actually, the Yerbada jail, I mean, there's a huge men's jail, which is called the main jail, on the other side of the road to the women's jail. And at the time we were there, I think it housed as many as 5,500 inmates. It was a huge jail. So, huge jail divided into many wards and with these towers and all that, and really looking like a fortress. And on the other side was the women's jail, which was, of course, smaller. It had two main compounds. So there was a convicts compound and an under trials compound. And it had these, single-story barracks in that. And yeah, we were in the convicts compound where the Phansi yard was. And after the initial 1 week where I was in the hospital bag, I was shifted there to the Phansi yard, and that's where we were. Yes, that's right. Mm-hmm. And yeah, the bulk of the book is written from the Phansi yard. It isn't about the Phansi yard, but from the Phansi yard. So yeah, those were, single cells, solitary cells. There were two sisters who shared that yard with us in their respective cells. And then there was myself and Professor Sen. And then there was a fifth a cell in which usually the lady constables used to be 24/7 on guard for us. They would use that, and there was a narrow corridor in front of the cells, and this entire thing was sort of like a cage with bars in front, and at the back of our cell also there was a window overlooking the factory where women would go to work. So basically, when we would be let out of our cells, we'd be sitting in that corridor. Maybe we'd be sitting together having breakfast or tea. We were allowed to sit together, or whatever, lunch, or and then rest of the time we'd be sitting separately in front of our separate cells. When we were inside, we could have a peek at the back as well. So it was a sort of, it was a cage with a view, and it was through those bars that I would watch. So there was a large sort of ground in front of us. A lot of women would be sitting there, eating their food, looking after their children, gossiping, fighting, everything. And then, right in front was the gate. So at the gate, that was a place of action. So that's where, prisoners would be called out because the doctors had come, or they'd be called out for their mulakat. On one side was the mulakat room. Or they'd be called to go to the court, in which case you'd go there and be strip searched and be sent out to the court. So that was the happening place in the jail. So we'd be watching that. So basically, though we were alone, I would keep watching, and somebody would take my eye, and then I would, whenever we had an opportunity to go out for mulakat or filling water or to the canteen or to the court, then I would seek out that person, and then
and that's how the stories and the notes about that person's life and case sort of have emerged in this book.
That's right. Over several encounters with that person, and then when I felt that I had a good enough sense, I would write. That's why there are no dates. There are no dates, and not a diary with dates.
Yeah. So it's quite interesting. It's almost like note making, and it's a record of the time that you've spent. Sudha, as a lawyer, this experience of seeing the Indian prison system from the inside in this manner, has it changed your perspective in terms of your profession and what lawyers need to do, how they need to do it better? I mean, you said very laughingly that all the applications you wrote at Baikala jail, you didn't manage to get, your success rate wasn't high. You didn't manage to get anyone bail. But is there something that this experience has meant to you as a lawyer, and therefore your understanding of what people you represent need?
Yeah. There's been a deepening of the understanding. You see, even otherwise, the kind of people I would advocate for when I was outside. Yes. I mean, it was the working class, or it was people, villagers facing land acquisition, or it was Adivasis for their forest rights, or, opposing mining or environmental destruction or something. So they were always, they were always the underdog. It was always the David versus Goliath battle. So one could see that they had a tough time trying to get a lawyer. They often there were biases against them. Many times they would be victimized, harassed for taking up matters in the court and all that. So it's not that I was unaware of the, let me say, the lopsidedness or the skewedness of the criminal justice system. But I think because I'm not a criminal lawyer by practice, but I began to understand, how desperate is the need for improving legal aid. Because so many women were just dependent on legal aid. Women particularly, because, when there is a man in jail, and particularly if he's the breadwinner of the family, a lot of effort is made to get him out, and the entire family rallies around and so on. Many a time women, and particularly if they're involved in something like murder of a husband or, something like that, they will be, shunned. Maybe even by their natal family, of course, by the marital family, even by the natal family. So many of them really depend sheerly on legal aid. And that is where, the inefficiency, the callousness with which that system is run. I mean, it really has, it has severe implications. And that, I think, came home to me. I always knew it.
Sure.
I always knew, I always knew that the legal aid system, in fact, I remember when I was part of the High Court Legal Aid Services Authority in Chhattisgarh, we had passed a resolution. The chairman was at that time Justice Pritinkar Divakar, who was recently retired from the Allahabad High Court as Chief Justice. And he made a very good effort to increase the remuneration of the legal aid lawyers, because the legal aid lawyers were being paid so poorly that it would be little incentive for them to take up such cases. Yeah, but there's more to it, which is that, the kind of accountability one expects from a lawyer towards their client. That is just that, in the legal aid system, it just wasn't there. Once you get a brief, you must go and meet your client. You must go and know their side of the story. You must know all the time what is going on with them. It's your duty to inform them what is happening in the court. You need to take instructions. This is a thing which I think really came home to me, and that's why I'm very grateful, and I'm happy that this new system which was started when Justice U. Lalit was the Chief Justice, which is of the Legal Aid Defense Council system, where you have you're paying a young lawyer, not necessarily, because the earlier legal aid system, you had to have 7 years of practice before you could even be empaneled as a legal aid lawyer. But then usually the idealism has gone out of people by then. They've either sunk or they're doing well for themselves. So, the young lawyers who'd really like to do legal aid were sort of kept out of it, but they were also not paid sufficiently. So, to have a fixed remuneration, even younger people, but being supervised by seniors, and being given a decent remuneration, I think this is really very important. But even more so is the requirement that there has to be an accountability to the prisoner. We are representing the prisoner, and we have to be accountable to them.
Yeah.
And only then can we really have a level playing field for the large number of poor people who are totally dependent on the legal aid system, who can't afford lawyers. And until that really happens, we really can't say justice is being done properly.
So what are the kind of cases that you're fighting now, or appearing for now, or taking up now in Mumbai?
So basically, I sit in a senior advocate's chamber, and I'm helping with most of the types of cases which are coming to her. So they are mostly labor cases, I would say. That was anyway my forte.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of labor cases. And we've been doing a case regarding the deaths of manual scavengers. We've been doing cases regarding, again, in fact, one of the cases is on this Bombay Habitual Offenders Act, the prejudice against the DNT people. So cases of this nature, but also that chamber has many cases, for slum dwellers, regarding environmental issues.
So you're managing to see.
I'm back in my forte.
You're back doing what you like doing best. You also mentioned that while you're not able to visit Chhattisgarh and you're not able to be physically in contact with the people, your community there, whether it's your fellow colleagues and trade union comrades, you are appearing for cases, you said, via video conference.
Yes, I've begun doing that recently. I've begun doing that, and I hope that will continue. So in a remote way, yes. Of course, it doesn't compare with really being there, but
in your book, you talk about how you're a trade unionist, and how that is something that is a lifelong commitment, and how the process of change it takes forever, but you cannot you can't quit it. I want you to talk a little bit about that, and also you say that you've seen the underbelly of capitalism, and the trickle down that was promised post liberalization, and something that India celebrates and most Indians celebrate, it did not trickle down, the benefits of liberalization. I want you to talk about both these elements, because you bring it up, and I think that has far-reaching interest.
So I have been a trade unionist now since maybe 80s. And in fact, it was being part of the trade union which made me a lawyer. It was the union which asked me to become a lawyer. And I became a lawyer for the workers initially. The whole idea that there's going to be a trickle-down effect of growth comes from what? I mean, how does it trickle down? I mean, we keep presuming that more and more industrial growth is going to trickle down. But what is the mechanism of trickling down? The mechanism of trickling down is actually by increasing the purchasing power of people. In the urban areas, in the rural areas. And then that is what is going to come into the markets. And that is what is going to make the wealth circulate in the market. So the problem really is that when you start making a lot of profit, but you don't pay people, then these two processes start separating out. So the process of profit and on the other side, impoverishing people. And unfortunately, post-liberalization, that is the biggest thing that has happened. I mean, I'll give you an example. Let us look at something like the Bhilai steel plant, which was a public sector plant. It was set up in the early 60s with Russian help. The Americans laughed and said, what will India do with the steel plant? But the Soviet Union agreed to help setting up the steel plant. And at that time, it had 96,000 permanent workers. A lot of workers, therefore, did not resist much when their lands were taken, when their lands were acquired for the plant, for the mines and all that, because 96,000 permanent jobs were given. And those workers, many of them invested what they got from those jobs back in home in the village. So maybe a tube well, or maybe, setting up a better house or buying a tractor or whatever it was. So, that really made a difference. Today, even in the public sector, you will find not more than 10% of the people are permanent workers. All the rest are contract workers. Now, the contract workers, get about a third of the wage that a permanent worker would get. So it is basically dirt cheap labor. And that dirt cheap labor you can see by the people who walked in the lockdown. 1 week into the lockdown, and they couldn't afford to stay in Mumbai because they would have to pay rent, they would have to purchase things from the shop, and they had no bank balance. They had no house, they had no bank balance, and they were walking back to UP and Bihar, and so many of them died on the way. I mean, it said some 3,000 or so died while walking back home. So this is the labor on which all this glitz and glitter is being, because, later on, the people in the construction industry in Mumbai said, well, until our workers come back, we can't start. So the kind of work that you want them to do, climbing up with hardly any safety.
I mean, you have such regular reports of workers dying on construction sites, whether it's, public infrastructure or private buildings. There is, we had an explosion in a private, explosives factory in Maharashtra. I mean,
in Nagpur. Did you know that there were 8 of them were women?
In your long battle with a wide range of industries that use labor and exploit labor, what do you put all this down to? Just greed, human greed? What makes people exploit labor in the way they do, whether it is domestic labor and families and homes, whether it's middle class or upper middle class and wealthy, or industries across board from mining to manufacturing?
Well, I think there are two things there. One is that we are deeply hierarchical societies. And
that is...
So
that also draws from the caste system that we
exactly yes. So the deep hierarchy is of class, of caste, of region, of gender. So the joke is that we respect the least the people who work the most, actually, and we also have a hierarchy between intellectual labor and manual labor, where we feel that manual labor is not worthwhile. I mean, this whole, even the whole, the concept of, the castes coming from different parts of the body, and ultimately the Sudras come from the feet where the work is done. So work itself is denigrated. But actually, the fact that every work, I mean, no work can be done without the intellectual input. It is, I mean, you and I will not be able to farm. It looks very simple, but if you are a farmer, I mean, you know what goes into farming. And every task, I mean, you look at a potter, you look at a carpenter, they are ingenious. There's ingenious creativity. Now, unfortunately, what the capitalist system has also done is to break the task into so many minuscule parts
that labor can't even own it.
Exactly. You can't even take credit for something beautiful that you're creating. I mean, you're making the door of a car, for God's sake. And you're making like 800 doors in the day. But there's never a single car that you can say, okay, here, this is mine, and I made this. And that alienation of the labor, I mean, which is talked about by a lot of Marxists, is really something. And then it's also, for the worker, you've made them a person who therefore has nothing to look forward to, has no future to look forward to, has no pride in what they're doing, who has no, it's very different from a person who does some work and gains some happiness and joy and pride after doing that work. We have actually, in the structure of our society has done this, and which is extremely, extremely unfortunate. And now we are going to extreme lengths with it. I mean, the gig workers, for example, Swiggy and Zomato. I mean, that is really like, it's pushing down, it's depressing prices across the board of businesses, of hotels, of restaurants, and basically people are racing away on cycles. And now, okay, maybe the customer will feel king, and 5 minutes my Blinkit is arriving, and so on and so forth. But you also are somebody's Blinkit. You also are going to be somebody's Blinkit. You might be thrown out of your IT job tomorrow. You might be surplus. You might not. You might be having an MA and doing manual labor. And in some cases where the caste is further intertwined with this, I know of people who, in the early days in Mumbai, in the municipal corporation, you could get a house as a service quarter if you were doing a sweeping job. So there were certain colonies. Now, of course, all those colonies are to be redeveloped, but they're not going to be given to sweepers. They're going to be given to other people, and these people still don't have ownership rights. But there are people who, after their children have done MAs, will continue to sweep only to keep that roof over their parents' head. So you've tied people into these situations. It's, it's really, if you go deeply into it, it's something which is difficult to live with. But how it is justified in the name of what efficiency in the that is why this whole flaunting these, so many trillion economy and so much of GDP and so much of growth. We need to look at the figures of distribution. We need to look at per capita incomes, and there we'll get a shock. Because, the top, 10% might be owning 50% of the assets.
You talked with great ease, but you did acknowledge the fact that failure is very high in the battles that you have chosen to fight, but not to fight is not an option. So when you, at the start of a new year, what do you look at as things that you're looking forward to?
I think one thing I would definitely like, and which is, sort of heavy on my heart, is that all my other co-accused in my case, who still remain behind bars, I fervently hope that this year will bring them all freedom. I mean, Shoma Sen, of course, I've talked about many times in my book.
Yes.
But there are others, and I think each one of them is really a public intellectual, is really a social activist, is really somebody who's contributed something to this country, to this society. We need to acknowledge that and stop punishing them. All over the world we are seeing. I mean, this time I think a very big lesson which the farmers taught us.
Yes.
Last year, when we saw, that these people whom we never even think about, the guys who put your roti and your chawal on your plate every day, we never think about them. So the way they got together and they asserted themselves, and
politically, the way they got together politically to roll back the farm laws, you're saying that was inspirational.
And I do believe that other sections of the people, and I hope other sections of the people will follow in their footsteps, whether it is the workers, whether it is the Adivasis who are fighting for their forest rights, whether it is the Dalits who are fighting for their rights and their dignity. Particularly when I can't help but remember the words of Bezwada Wilson when he says that I mean we've reached the moon and we are reaching Mars, but we still
send
have to get down into the
gutters. Yes.
Send men down into our gutters.
I've had the privilege of recording conversations with Bezwada Wilson.
Yes, I think these are the things that we must hope and pray that this stops. This has to stop.
It has to stop.
People dying have to stop.
Yes, people dying for just lack of facilities, lack of caring from other people that has to stop.
Lack of acknowledgement, lack of dignity, lack of respect.
Yes. Sudha, we could continue this conversation for a very long time, but I'm going to close it here. Thank you very much for talking to us and sharing all of the experiences, the worldview, and what you hope for. And we hope to talk to you at several points. We hope to keep talking.
Great. And a happy new year to you. And let me say, I hope the press has greater freedom this year.
Thank you. All the very best.
Thank you.